Right, I'm going to try a short video with quite a few things to cover on Wales devolution, rail, high speed 2. Um, I sometimes think people view the questions of what Wales needs through a lens or telescope that's based somewhere else. I'm not being overcritical, but I'm trying to look at this from a Welsh perspective. So let's start with the constitutional issue. Wales voted for devolution in 1997. There's a government in Wales which has responsibilities for health, for education, and for most transport, local transport, for highways, for the rail subsidy. But it doesn't have responsibility for investing in the rail network, apart now from the core valley lines, which was just transferred. There's a whole conversation about the valuation of that and the regulatory asset base, which I'll park for now. Welsh government has got its own policy, and local authorities have their policies on transport. We have the Wales Transport Strategy, we have the now Net Zero Wales. So from a Welsh perspective, the priority in the next 15 years to decarbonise is to mode shift, is to get people out of their cars, and that requires investment in integrated transport, in not bus or rail, but bus and rail where what mode is appropriate. We can't do that at the moment because the powers for rail enhancement investment have and continue to be vested at the Department for Transport in Whitehall. Now, this doesn't really work. Now, in Wales, over the last few years, obviously we've got the South Wales Metro programme progressing. We're developing programmes around North Wales, in South East Wales. What further work can we do in Swansea Bay? And these are bringing forward really exciting, potentially transformative investment programmes for the next 15 years. Half of it, though, is on network rail asset, which requires enhancements as part of a holistic programme. At the moment, there seems little prospect of addressing many of these opportunities and delivering our decarbonisation obligations because that funding and those powers and those decisions reside at Westminster. I don't think it works. I mean, as a general point, I think the whole responsibility for transport and major investment decisions is too centralised at Westminster. I think the recent decision as part of the integrated rail plan, which was a cut to high speed 2, disappointingly, also took responsibility for Northern Powerhouse Rail off Transport for the North. That's exactly the wrong thing to do. More powers and more funded decisions and more capacity to be strategic should be invested more locally in England, let alone Wales or Scotland. So that's a general point. Talking about, again, looking at Wales and where the priorities are, I'm not anti-high speed 2. I'm not we need more public transport capacity. But to try and sell high speed 2 as being the most important project for Wales is frankly naive. And let's look at the data. Wales has got a population of 3 million people, 50% of whom, 1.5 million, live around South East Wales, within 25 miles of Cardiff. That's the bulk of where people live most densely in Wales. When you add Swansea Bay, that's sort of Swansea Neath, Carmarthen, Pembrokeshire, that's another 700,000, which is 22% of the population. You've got basically nearly 75% of the population of Wales live along that South Wales strip. The North Wales population, that's the local authorities from Wrexham across to Gwynedd and Ysmon, is again about 700,000, 22% of the population. And Mid Wales, the big chunk between Ceredigion and Powys, is only about, I think, 200,000 and about 7% of the population. Important. But it's probably, it's half the population of Cardiff. It's a sixth of the population of the Cardiff capital region. These are important considerations. If you look at where people are moving and look at the commuting stats, I know these are pre-COVID. In South East Wales, there's about a 700,000 working population. Only 62,000 are moving out of the region. A bulk to Bristol and Bath, about 26,000. About 4,000 to the West Midlands and about 5,000 to London and the South East. In North East Wales, there's about, again, I think, if I look at my figures on here, about, again, 300,000 people, in the working population. About 45,000 move out of North Wales. The bulk of that is to kind of Chester, West Cheshire, a little bit to the Wirral, a bit to Manchester, and a bit more to the West Midlands, about 5,000. The truth is, though, and the figures are the same for Mid Wales, the bulk of the movements and mobility challenges are within the regions, they're inter-regional movements. I got the figures for Wales as a whole, of the 1.43, 1.45 million people working, less than 100,000 are commuting out cross-border, and the bulk of that really is in sort of Bristol, Bath, South West England, and back and forth, which is why the South Wales Main Line and the Burns work and the fact that the Union Connectivity Review highlighted the South Wales Main Line is key. And a little, that bulk of local movement in North East Wales. And one of the biggest issues we have across the UK, and this goes back to the Eddington Transport Study in 2006-7, is the bulk of our challenges to mobility, especially post-COVID, when more flexible working and trying to level up, are intra-regional. There are lots of those, many more local journeys that are predominantly made in a car. So from a Welsh perspective, the primary objectives are to improve our intra-regional mobility choices and make them more sustainable, which means invest in more rail and more bus, a lot more bus, in an integrated way. It's not addressing the 6-7% of cross-border movements to places like Birmingham and Manchester and London, important though they are, but they're number 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 on the list of priorities. That's why for me, High Speed 2 is a really important project for England. The bulk of its benefits serve the West Coast mainland corridor. To argue that's not the case is, I think, missing the point a little bit. So we have to be honest about what's important in Wales versus what's important elsewhere. And people then say, getting back to the devolution question, well, there's a lot of cross-border movement, you can't evolve in. Well, why not? Every other country in the world manages to deal with cross-border issues. Aachen, Liège and Maastricht are 3 cities in 3 countries less than 20 miles apart in Europe that all have responsibility for those investment decisions, but work together collaboratively where there's overlap, and there clearly is, to deliver coherent, holistic interventions to serve the populace that moves across those borders. At the moment now, Wales doesn't have control or influence or any kind of meaningful say on the process by which the UK Treasury and Department of Transport invest in rail enhancements. And there's 30 years of data. It's been a pretty poor show. And the reason I get so agitated is because that needs to be addressed. And I think, as I said, this is a UK problem. We over-centralise capital investment in transport in the southeast of the country. And that has economic consequences. You depreciate your asset, it becomes less attractive, less effective. Those bits that aren't invested become more attractive, carry more people, and the economic benefits over a long period of time are pretty clear, I think. So that's one thing on the data. Getting back to High Speed 2 again, I pick on this because of the fact it is defined as an England and Wales project. Rail is not devolved. We have all these opportunities in Wales to invest further in our transport. In North East Wales, the local issues means we need more local commuter services on the North Wales Main Line. Between Chester, we need the borderlands upgraded. We need more bus integration. The extra service we might get from High Speed 2 or interface crew is important, but it is in the margins of what the priorities are. Similarly, in Swansea Bay, we need the SDL integrated with the South Wales Mainland to create a local metro. There's loads of work being done, business case development work. In South East Wales, we've got £1 billion of schemes to Cardiff Crossrail, the Ebbw Valley My Stade line. These are all much more important from a Welsh perspective than £38 billion for high speed phase 1, 2 and 2A. Again, I'm not knocking that, build that. But it's not our priorities. It's not the most important thing for Wales. It doesn't deliver the things we need that Welsh Government has set out in policy on decarbonisation and mode shift. And to pretend it does, I think is missing the point. So let's talk about the benefits of High Speed 2. Disappointingly, the integrated rail plan has basically cut High Speed 2 and the eastern branch is gone. And I do take the point. Some of the benefits of the network are about release capacity, but the business case, and there's no point arguing it's bad, it's not the business case that doesn't work. It is the business case. It's being produced by diligent, well-meaning consultants for the Department of Transport, and that's the basis upon which funding decisions are made. Not my musings or anybody else's musings. That is the basis upon which a major funding decision for transport in the UK has been made. Now, if we ignore that the eastern leg, which has been pulled out, you've got, I think, £38 billion of benefits for the phases up to Manchester and about £50 billion of costs. £18 billion of revenues with a cost of government of £32 billion and a BCR of 1.2, which is low value for money. Now, I'm not knocking it. I think, get on and do it, frankly. But can we define it as an England-only project? One of the benefits that people challenge is, and in the 38 billion of benefits, they've included about £20 billion of wider economic benefits. The Treasury don't normally like to do that and add those kind of things because they're harder to calculate, they're more open to challenge. But to bolster the business case, they've had to. So I don't disagree with that. But in that analysis, and we can be critical all we like, based upon KPMG's work that I was following from 2009, from Greengage, which was updated in 2013, it does demonstrate a negative abstractive impact on the overall Welsh economy. There is some minor benefits in North East Wales, but overall to Wales, it's a £150 million negative impact on GDP. Do I like that? No. Is it right? Maybe, maybe not. Is that the official number that's being used to support the business case? Yes. Therefore, that's the one I'm going to challenge and I'm going to use. There's a similar negative impact in Bristol and South West England. The argument about release capacity, I get, but you've got to be careful about how you calculate the benefits. So the business case is predominantly based upon the new services, as far as I understand. And if I got this wrong, somebody please challenge me. So all the new services to Liverpool, to Manchester, up to Glasgow, and the transport benefits are added and compared to the do nothing. So in a business case, you have a do nothing, which is what we have now. Then you look at the benefits from the investment in the infrastructure and the services you will operate. If you then want to add in benefits for release capacity and new services, well, you can do that. But DFT did a piece of work via Steer to look at where the main benefits for release capacity are. And there clearly are being able to backfill the West Coast mainland with more local all-stopper services. So, Milton Keynes, up to Luton, Coventry, Birmingham, up through Stoke and Cheshire would, provided more local services. Great. Now, they did say you could maybe run an extra, an hourly service to Holyhead. As I said, from a Welsh perspective, that's important, but it's not the most important thing. But it is be good to get, frankly. But it's a small piece of the Welsh jigsaw. Similarly, you could run perhaps another service to Aberystwyth, but Aberystwyth is not even in the top 30 biggest stations in Wales. Yes, would that be good to have? Absolutely. Is it the most important thing from a Welsh perspective, given what I've said about policy and decarbonisation and population? No, it's not. And one of the things, and someone again challenged me on this, if you try and allocate and cost the benefits of freed up capacity, what you have to do is say, right then, here's the benefits of the new high-speed services. That frees up pathways that were used by West Coast mainland services for new services to other places, and you can calculate the benefits of what they are. But when you do that, you have to take away the services you removed. Now, the likelihood is, and again, someone can do the numbers, because the original West Coast mainland services were faster express and intercity, probably have a higher benefit than a similar number of smaller, more local all-stopper services. So maybe if you added that to your benefits for the new high-speed services, you actually will reduce the total benefits rather than increase the total benefits. I'm not saying that's right or good, but that's the way transport appraisal and economic analysis will be done. And again, if I've got that wrong, somebody please tell me. So that's why they've not probably been included. There's also a fact to bear in mind. If you want to run an extra service to Aberystwyth or to Wrexham, there's other bits of infrastructure required to enable that are not costed in the business plan for High Speed 2. And you can't, in the business plan, claim benefits related to infrastructure you've not costed or included. That's just not how we do things. That's not how WellTag works. If you want to have a holistic approach, you have to cost in the extra parcel loops on the Cambrian line, or address the single track section between, I think it's Wrexham and Shrewsbury, so that we can run more services. But they're not costed. And from a Welsh perspective, these have been long-standing questions and issues that go back decades. My sense of frustration goes back, when the West Coast Main Line had a £9 billion upgrade, late 90s, early 2000s. That was going to deliver benefits to North Wales, and the reality is there's some faster services. But North Wales gets 6 trains a day onto the West Coast Main Line. There's not even an hourly service. And High Speed 2 is not modelled any through services to the North Wales Main Line. The line is not electrified. And as I said, the most important thing for North Wales is more local all-stopper commuter services which we can integrate local bus services with. So I don't want to get into this fight about is High Speed 2... I mean, High Speed 2 is a really important piece of infrastructure for England. But please, it is not the most important piece of infrastructure for Wales. There's a huge amount of work being undertaken by consultants, by Welsh Government, by Transport for Wales, and has set out the things that we need to do. High Speed 2 might be halfway up page 2 of those. But it's not the priority, it's not the most important thing. And whilst we have this constitutional anomaly where rail infrastructure is defined as England and Wales, where I see and we see a further £96 billion going into the integrated rail plan, which is High Speed 2 plus some bits and pieces, and none of that being set out in a way that Wales gets any bound or consequential, we get shortchanged. Now, there's also an argument that says, oh, High Speed 2 has been funded separately. That's naive. From a Treasury perspective, High Speed 2 is just a line item in a DfT budget, which also includes enhancements for Network Rail. And we know the RNet process is very bureaucratic. And actually, again, because the way it's been set up and managed, it disenfranchises Wales again. So when I see more money go to High Speed 2, I know it will squeeze the rail enhancement budget, which is the only mechanism currently Wales has of getting funding for the bits of the railwork that UK's government is responsible for. So we've got some problems in Wales. And, I don't want to see this as me versus High Speed 2, but please stop trying to sell High Speed 2 as being the most important beneficial project for Wales. It is not. It's important for England. It's important for the UK from a decarbonisation perspective, from a mode shift perspective. But from a Welsh perspective, there are 15, 20 more important projects that need funding. And if the UK government are not going to devolve responsibility and provide binding consequentials, then they should be funding those as priorities for Wales. And I've set out some other papers about how Welsh government, UK government could work together. So crack on with High Speed 2, build it, decarbonise, mode shift, but please, it's not what Wales needs. It's not our most important project. And if you want to know what they are, there's plenty of documentation and evidence for that. Thank you.